3 seconds.
Go.
Okay. I did this project mostly because I wanted an excuse to get better at plants. I think trees are charming and cute and full of personality, and I wanted to try to make a bunch of indoor bonsai. So I'm going to take you through a little bit about bonsai, and then talk about how to go about making them. So just a quick note on cultural appropriation, because sometimes it's hard to approach this, where you're like, oh, this is only for Zen philosophy, this is like about great struggle, you have to speak Chinese and Japanese and everything else. People make bonsai out of like random native plants in Australia. At this point, it's like anything you want to do. The main idea is a shallow tray and a small tree. And there's a couple of other different landscaping art forms like Boken or Seiko, where you basically make a tiny tray landscape. But bonsai is about having a tree. You have to have at least something that would have been a bigger plant, and you're making a miniature giant space hamster. So these are all some of the forms that were just shown on the previous slide, but what they can look like in real plants. Something like a literati style, where you've got the struggling, like, kind of ancient tree, or really smug, like, kind of miniaturized, perfect outdoor trees, the kind you find in the Shire. Quick note on proportions for bonsai. You want to have this thick trunk, so it's like a gigantic tree brought small, thin upper branches, and a nice overall shape. Less successful, more successful, just to give you some idea about it. And so you're like, okay, I like trees, I like giant things indoors, this sounds awesome. How do I get me a tiny forest or like a crazy cliff thing? And you start looking at these online, and I promise as soon as you start getting into like, oh, I want one, this will be great. And then I'll just water it and it will, whoa. So if you want to have really nice bonsai that have trunks thicker than like, this big, you kind of got to go make them yourself or make friends with someone else who's hoarding them. And I can talk a little bit about that in the question and answer section, but you're thinking, okay, I'll just get a small pot, then I'll get a small plant. This is going to be great. Got myself a shallow pot from the internet, and I went and found the seedling under a tree, and it's a small tree, so small tree, small pot, boom, and you're going to get something that looks like that when you're going for this. And the thing here is that plants do actually have an age and a lifespan, and you're trying to get a plant that looks older, that has a developed set of ridges in their trunk, that has developed roots and a personality. And so you could wait about 25 years, or you could go out and get a hedge, which Sarah's been stopping you from stealing from the wild, and root train it, where basically you teach it how to live in a shallow pot, and instead of massive tap roots, you have these fluffy, airy roots. So it can get water, it can get nutrients, and it can all do that in that little pot you're keeping it in. So here's like a basic sapling. That's about $15. If you go to a bonsai nursery that's like, this is for bonsaiing, and you're like, okay, sure. These are about $8 to $15, and these are for making hedges out of. When you have like 4 acres somehow in South Bay, and you want to have like, hedges. So you can buy one of those for way cheaper. You can also buy pots from the internet, or if you make a lot of bad pottery like me, you have a lot of pottery disasters that you're hoarding. And that's a $4 masonry bit in about 45 minutes. You only need 2. I stopped because I was just really done. The 2 are because that's how you wire them into the tray. That's taking a hedge plant, and over the course of about 35 minutes, breaking the roots out, gently fluffing them, making it just the shallow root ball, and then wiring it in. These are the pots that you'd wire into. Again, the 2 holes are because you're holding it flat. This is the same plant. It's really sharp. I hate this one. That's why I didn't bring it in, because it's kind of prickly. Like, we're still having a conversation, but I had a sweet trunk buried inside of here that I had to dig out. And I haven't wired it yet. I just wanted to go for that half cascade. This one has 2 trunks. This is a boxwood. But I looked at how shallow my pots were, and the boxwood's root mass was actually a little bit taller than I wanted. So I'm trying to train it shallow for about another 6 months to a year. I'm going to let it hang out in this about 3-inch tall one. And I said you didn't want saplings, but I lied. Because they're really, really cute if you make bonsai that are even smaller. You just have to get a smaller pot. So this is the soil that makes it happen. It holds moisture and water, and it drains really well, so you don't end up getting soggy roots that will die if they have no oxygen. So this is the Okinawa soil, the full length of the taproot that I was working with, and what it looks like when you pop it out. You can gently fluff that out and then find out what the main trunk of the root is, because plants are actually almost perfectly symmetrical in many cases. You're trying to create that spread out root structure inside the pot. So here's another taproot carefully coiled up, because these pots are very tiny, and they're actually over there on that table. At least this one is. That one I like a lot, and I was biking, so I didn't bring it. The akadama also, you need to have a little grid in there to hold it. This is my kitchen sink right now, at least, so I brought at least a couple of these guys in. That's a native California madrone. I'm trying to figure out what kind of water and food it needs, and then I'm going to go and get a bigger one from a totally safe, normal place, like PLM land. This is where I got a lot of my stuff. Yamagami's is in Cupertino. If you're from the city, you'll be like, pfft. But if you're from South Bay, it's actually not very far to get to. And those plants are all cheap. And they all have like large trunks, nice roots, good to go. And this is the end of my slide. This is a redwood that I've been working with for like 8 years, and it's not really a bonsai, and it's not really succeeding, and we're having a negotiation about whether or not someday it will actually be in a real shallow pot. But I have hope. And I brought some of these in just to show you if you hadn't actually seen the difference between a normal flower pot and some of the wiring you do to hold plants in.
So that was my question about the wire. What are you? How does it hold? What are you doing with
Is
those?
it 120 or 240?
You can get all kinds of different grades of wire. You mostly just want to have the minimum you need to hold the plant in. So the idea is with a shallow root base and no massive taproot, you need to provide the taproot. So if you take the tree and you make it so it only has a shallow fluff of roots, then what you do is you actually hold it down. So you've got this ball of dirt in the tree and you do a gentle loop around the trunk to hold it. And if you get a chance, you can actually squint and find the wires on all of those, holding them into the pot, because otherwise it would go and like just get dirt everywhere. And then this is to keep the dirt from coming out. It's just a small mesh grid that I folded this on top of. So the tree would be here. Pass it back. Anyone wants to play with pot?
Well, I have so many questions. What does it mean to train the roots? What?
So the tree is an entity, and you're actually having a chemical hormonal conversation with it. If you give it tons of light, if you give it tons of fertilizer, if you give it too much water, you're basically saying do this thing. And so if you've ever hiked up a mountain 3 different biomes, you'll hit what's crumholts, which is the same junipers, but now they're going along the ground and they're much smaller. You're basically recreating the hormonal moment when the tree says, oh fuck this going up straight, I'm going to spread out horizontally. So you're trying to create an environment that's just hazardous enough where the tree's like, okay, I'm pulling things back, but so it's just happy enough that it grows grows continuously. And so one of the things you do with like a maple or a broadleaf tree is you pluck the leaves at least once in the season, because the first leaves are bigger. When you pluck them, the second leaves out, the tree's like, hey, that was all my sugar for the year, whoa now, and so the leaves are smaller and tinier foliage.
Do you have to keep doing that, or is it eventually learn?
You have to keep doing that. The roots you can basically train where once they realize they don't need a taproot, they'll stop. On the Tasmanian tree tea over there, I nicked the taproot because I was trying to make it fit and I killed it. So I brought it here to admit that things go wrong.
Which one?
So let's say the redwood tree, normally it would grow up to, hundreds of feet, so something like that.
Yeah, it's a terrible choice for bonsai.
But, or any other tree. But if you just change the environment, put them in this tiny thing, they automatically grow their mini version?
They'll scale themselves. A lot of it is trimming the roots. Every few years you have to take them out and cut back some of the roots, so that way they're like, oh, this is the size of my root base? Okay, that's cool. This is how much metabolizing I'm going to do. You can also change like how much sunlight you give them.
But in the evolution, it takes generations to adapt to an environment for survival. But with trees, you can do that with one. Like the same thing you have. If you take the same seeds, put them out in the wild, they'll grow up to be full size. But if you do your thing, then it'll be.
Yeah, I mean the plant is sort of a scalable pile. It's a colony of cells trying to do something. So you can actually see redwoods doing this all the time. They'll go up straight, fall over a little bit. And then because the tree has lost its top or it's in distress, the base will sprout. That's because it stopped being able to suppress all of the other things growing up. So one of the ways people actually do keep redwoods, is you basically get a trunk and you put it sideways and you let the shoots come up, and that's how you basically say, hey, this is my tree. It's got a giant trunk and all these shoots. Because it's kind of like a sponge colony, really. Redwoods are weird.
Can you bonsai anything? So like you're trying to bonsai the redwood, but then I'm thinking like, can you also bonsai the shamrock? Like, is there some?
I think in general you go with hardwoods or with. This is where my plant biology falls off a cliff because like I didn't actually hit that hard for this talk. You want something that has a larger form, like you were asking about, that you can then basically trade small. If you have the clover, it's like they'll basically just be the same size no matter what.
Okay, so you can't make like tiny little shamrock to go with your tiny little bonsai?
You might be able to get some, but that would be almost genetic variants. Like when you go up to alpine climates and you have the miniature version of the same wildflowers you see at like.
So they're actually more different than the bonsai.
They may actually be a bigger genetic spread because those are like annuals. Like who cares, right? They're like rabbits. You want something that's got like a longer individual lifespan.
So let's talk about some of those funky shapes, those amazing, like really,
Can we go back to that?
really expensive, really valuable, interesting looking bonsais. Are they actually training the shape? Like, how much control over that do you have, or do you just let it do its thing?
For the really expensive ones, in many cases, these are actually like, it's something between a sculpture and a trained animal. The same way that you might bring a cat into a show or like a dog into a dog show, and you shampoo it, you groom it, and you like show it really successfully for several years, and then you let it hang out.
Only these sit still.
They sit still,
Yeah.
but I mean, for example, this is groomed moss that they had ready for the show, and some of these may actually be big junipers that they had in a bonsai colony, and then they were kind of training onto the slab for like a good 2-4 years. For this kind of twisting shape, there's no way to cheat that. You actually do need to sort of be shaping it. This one's really, really old, which is why it's ridiculously expensive. The ginned wood right here, this is something that people have started doing a lot in the last 30 or 40 years, where you take a juniper and then you shave off the outer bark, so you have this thin ribbon of the tree's actual body going through it, and then you have a whole lot of dead wood. And so you can make that shape really quickly, where you get a working tree, you kind of carve down where you want the line of tree to be, and then you let it settle for a few years, bleach it out a little bit, and then like arrange the foliage. So I don't know if that, it's kind of like haircuts, kind of like sculpture.
Are we doing like wire and things like that, of like binding it to make
Yeah.
it? Is that a thing?
Wire helps train it. Yeah, I didn't talk about wiring at all, because I haven't really wired these guys much. But you have to basically rewire your plants almost every 6 to 12 months. And you're doing a lot of that to get secondary branches to settle like the form of the, like if you had a main branch that was this big, your secondary branches would be like that big. And you're trying to get those to grow out and like kind of settle and form a permanent shape. But the whole thing is still moving. So just like you might train your dog, but you have to continue reinforcing it. Like if you just start feeding the table, like it's over. With the trees, if you don't train them and if you don't take care of their roots and cut their leaves back and all that stuff, it'll just be a bush in like 5-10 years. So it's kind of constant maintenance.
I saw a bonsai that had a full-size pomegranates on a tiny, tiny tree. Tell me anything about how that
It's a
happens?
pomegranate tree.
The leaves are small, but the fruit will be.
That's where genetics actually hits, like, where it's like, no, the pomegranate's this big. So the tree scales other things proportionate to the environment, because with any deciduous tree, it's redoing those leaves every year. So they have a whole response loop that says, I've got this much nutrient, pull back. Like, it was too dark, pull back. Or it's really wet this year, do this thing. But the pomegranate, like, genetic encode for that pomegranate's about that big, so.
But is it harder to get a bonsai to flower or fruit, right? Because if the plant's like, whoa, like environment's weird, and then
Well, I mean, it's like a kitchen table and you're hammering it, it might do better than the one in your backyard you're kind of ignoring. So it's like, it depends on how much you suck at plants. I suck at plants a lot, so I'm still working on that. I have no good answer to your question, but I got some Costco kumquats that I was going to try next.
Got one more. Is there a thing, fake bonsais? No? Because I got a bonsai for a friend, right? And he's convinced that it's just a branch planted in a bonsai box. And so I'm just wondering if fake bonsai could be a thing, right? Like fast-made bonsai.
I'm kind of talking about this here. Yeah, you can actually you can walk up to a tree, you can basically strip its bark off a little bit around a thick branch that you like, put some rooting hormone in there, and wrap a bunch of like damp material around it, give it like a few months, roots come out, cut the bottom off, boom, trunk.
But that doesn't make it fake, right?
It's a tree. I mean, genetically it's the same juniper,
Okay.
but
It's just not grown from a sapling.
yeah. And in some cases, I mean, plants are weird. Sarah and I talk about this a lot, where you have rootstock that's strong and powerful, and then a whole bunch of stuff that has nice leaves. So most Japanese maple have the same rootstock, just like grapes, and then the leaves are all the fancy stuff. So is that fake? Like,
Right.
anyway. There are a lot of
It's
bonsai
not
clubs
cute.
in
Oh,
South
you're
Bay.
cute.
There's a lot of bonsai clubs in the Mid-Peninsula, and I'm sure they're also in like East Bay and San Francisco. If you do a search for like Bonsai Expo, maybe like twice a year, they will have people bring in like, this is my project, this is the thing I'm proud of, does anyone want this one? And everyone has like 30 or 40 trees like in their porch. I'm not that bad right now. I think I'm only at like 7.
Do you know what makes some trees bonsai friendly and others not?
They grow fast, they're forgiving if you suck at cutting. Junipers, basically that's junipers because you get tiny foliage, so it looks good for scale. These are Scots pines, so they're a little bit more, actually sorry, that one's a juniper and that's a Scots pine. So you want fast growth, small foliage, maybe not fast growth once you've got it settled into a shape you like, and then handles stress well. So all of the junipers along the California coast are great for that. Really wimpy trees, like some of the deciduous ones, maybe not, because like you put them in a small crevice and they're like, oh, I can't handle this. And I've never seen like an elm bonsai.
Any more questions? Then let's thank Mel for her great.